Code monkey, get up, get coffee. Code monkey, go to job. Code monkey, have boring meeting with boring manager Rob. Rob say code monkey very diligent, but his output stink. His code not functional or elegant. What do code monkey think? Code monkey think maybe manager wanna write goddamn login page himself. Code monkey not say it out loud. Code monkey not crazy, just proud. Code monkey like Fritos. Code monkey like Tab and Mountain Dew. Code monkey very simple man with big warm fuzzy secret heart. Code monkey like you. Code monkey like you. Code monkey hang around at front desk till your sweater look nice. Code monkey offer buy you soda, bring you cup, bring you ice. You say no thank you for the soda, cause soda make you fat. Anyway, you busy with the telephone, no time for chat. Code monkey have long walk back to cubicle. He sit down, pretend to work. Code monkey not thinking so straight. Code monkey not feeling so great. Code monkey like Fritos. Code monkey like Tab and Mountain Dew. Code monkey very simple man, big warm fuzzy secret heart. Code monkey like you. Code monkey like you. Lots. Code monkey have every reason to get out this place. Code monkey just keep on working. See your soft pretty face. Much rather wake up, eat a coffee cake, take bath, take nap. This job fulfilling in creative way, such a load of crap. Code monkey thinks someday he have everything, even pretty girl like you. Code monkey just waiting for now. Code monkey says someday, somehow. Code monkey like Fritos. Code monkey like Tab and Mountain Dew. Code monkey very simple man, big warm fuzzy secret heart. Code monkey like you. Code monkey like you.
Okay, so I'm from Adelaide in Australia. I didn't study photography at all. I actually took up photography as a hobby just so I could learn it. Back at my chair. All right, and I need to see what's on the screen so I can talk about it. I'm going to start with some more recent photos. So this was taken 2 weeks ago in Sydney with Yaya when she was in town. This is at the Chinese Gardens just in Darling Harbour. We had a beautiful blue cloudless sky, which was absolutely terrifying, because if you know anything about photography, a beautiful blue cloudless sky is awful. And of course, Darling Harbour is surrounded by skyscrapers. So then you've got to try and work every angle to try and not get, modern buildings in shot, which is almost impossible. So, I would have loved more detail in the background, but it's just completely blown out by the sunshine. That was another one. This is half done. This was rushed. The top corner where the sky is was a skyscraper, which has been badly removed, and even put the lens flare in just to try and cover the fact there was a giant skyscraper. And you can see the hotels through the trees and stuff like that, but it just, you've got to pick your battles, I think. I was lying on the ground to take this shot, and she was like squatted on a rock. And the good thing about the Chinese Gardens in Darling Harbour, they're full of like sea dragons, the giant lizards. And we sat down to do this, and before we got there was one sitting on the rock right where her shoulder is, but of course they run away the second you get near them, but it would have been great to be the dragon in Milan. This is the same event, so this was Oz Comic Con in Sydney with infamous Laura. Again, this is just taken on a black background on the con floor. And this is obviously my very illustrative style. You know, I think people are always surprised where I put my lights in shots. So this was up on the Sunshine Coast. I was up there for Manifest, which is a small con that they've just started this year. And the prize was a photo shoot the next day with me. And I don't charge for my work. I don't charge for photo shoots because I still don't think my work's that good. Which is weird because I'm currently unemployed. I got made redundant after 18 and a half years in a job. So yeah, it's been a fun year. So this was up there. We were meant to shoot during the day and we just decided to keep going, and then we got the sunset, and I got this, we did a couple of setups before this, and I wish we started this one early because this is when the sky started losing the colour, and before this shot we had this most amazing sunset, as apparently they have every night in Queensland. This shot came about in about 15 minutes. We were at the Melbourne Esports Expo in Melbourne, where they basically had the Overwatch Championships and the League of Legends OPL on one weekend at Rod Laver. So they filled Rod Laver Arena with esports, and they had all these other events. And Blizzard had their own official cosplayers come along, and there was a couple other people in cosplay. And I've done a couple of Last Supper shoots recently, and I really like that Renaissance tableau look. You can do some really nice setups with it. And so I just sort of, do we have a table anywhere, and black tablecloths, and so we had these people running around finding tablecloths. And we did this in 2 setups. We did the left-hand side and then the right-hand side, and just stuck them together. And so that whole shot was sort of conceived and shot in 15 minutes. You don't have to put a lot of, you know, as long as you've got people in amazing costumes, the work does itself, really, is my opinion. Again, this was done about 2 months ago. I know a lot of gymnasts and acrobats and aerialists and things like that. It had absolutely poured with rain the night before, which we weren't expecting. And so I wasn't expecting to shoot this particular direction, but the floor basically to the right of the pole and where I'm standing was about 3 inches of water. And of course, once you throw powder in water, it becomes like cakey mud. So this entire place was just like destroyed by the time we left it. Usually my talk I just click through, so I better hurry up. This was done last week. It was freezing cold down by the bay, but Alana wanted to do a Halloween shoot. It's based on one of the, I can never pronounce the name, Kotobukiya statues. Anyone? Yell it out. That's the one, thank you. Of course he'd know. Did a lot of work, got the reflection of the mask and the knife and things like that, and the rain was all fake just because it was a bit flat. Again, people obviously accuse cosplay photographers are only shooting, photographing girls, but you know, I got quite a few shots of male cosplayers as well. Male cosplayers are hard to find, I have to say. You know, you get a lot of males turn up in onesies and think they're cosplayers. Now, it's fine to turn up in a onesie, but you know, when you're shooting as an art form, you obviously want more detailed costumes. And I can't say this costume is particularly detailed. I do like the weathering on it all and the painting, so it came up really well. So this was just at the photo wall at Brisbane Supernova, I think it was. That was at the photo wall at Brisbane Supernova. I do love Silk. Silk's one of my favourite characters to shoot. I am a graphic designer by trade, and so I think that affects my work greatly in terms of my composition and my choice of colour. And so just the splash of red, just, you know, I love that character. That was in Brisbane. That was at the photo wall in Adelaide. I do like obscure characters. I'm a huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, and that's Lorne from Angel. If anyone recognises the character, so that was my favourite cosplay from that event. I like that shot because that's all in camera. You know, we only had like 4 or 5 takes, but to get money floating like that, where you're not covering people's faces and it looks compositionally nice, is really difficult. Brooke, who's an ex-New Zealander. Woo! She is very photogenic, and hopefully I'll see her at PAX next week. most of my photos are completely black. I like to start in a black corner and build up light. Working with white spaces is very terrifying because I usually just blow the subject out and they're just completely obscured by a haze of white. So this, I don't do it very often. So this picture's here because it worked. I quite like that one. It's of Vera Camira. Another one, again, you know, the fabric's obviously completely fake. It's funny, some people think it's real. It's amazing what you get away with, even though you think it's, I did such a bad job of that. Because you can look at the material and tell it's an illustration. Come on. This kid waited in line at my photo wall. He was there for an hour and a half with his parents to get a photo, which I thought, you know, I think it was his first cosplay photo, so I made sure he got a good one out of it. And you know, those characters are just so easy to overlay. You know, it was done with red gels and stuff, but you can obviously put the sparks and stuff over. Scrap shot props. That was taken next to my house. That dog was great. I did a shoot, which I'll show before, which was another Last Supper shot with a dog who was so disinterested it wasn't funny. I wish I'd used this dog. This dog had been used in commercials and a music video as a wolf before. CB, that was just against a black wall at Sydney. Laura, again, so most of my photos these days are taken at cons because that's a con photo. Again, a white one, which was scary. That was standing on a bedside table, which I can't do anymore. I do like the top-down shots, though. I'd like to do more with leaves and the ground and stuff like that. Again, another shot that I can barely do these days because of the ground. That's I had a waterfall in Adelaide, so that's all in camera apart from a bit of the spray. And that's Jennifer Hale, who was one of the guests, and we shot her with all the Mass Effect cosplayers. And even I have no idea how I got to shoot Jennifer Hale in front of a group of Mass Effect cosplayers, or how I ended up in New Zealand talking about my work. And so this is sort of just how I got into photography and how I ended up here, that, you know, even I'm surprised that all you guys turned up to hear me ramble on about these photos. In 2008, a friend of mine was living in Japan. He bought me my first camera. I had a few film cameras before that, you know, like the small point-and-click ones. I even had the digital ones where you took a photo and, you know, 5 to 10 seconds later, you might get the photo. And so when my friend was overseas, he got me this entry-level Nikon, and I really loved it at the time. I thought it was great. At the same time, my partner and I bought a house, and so we finally decided to adopt a couple of cats from the animal welfare shelter near us. So that's my stepson and the 2 cats we adopted. And so I took some photos of the cats. And so obviously we moved into a new house, so that's the mattress box my stepson's bed came in, you know, and the cat's box, you know, logical. So he ran in there. And so I took just took shots of the cats around the house. And I sent them to the shelter and said, oh, you know, thank you for all your help. Here are some photos of the cats. And they said, oh, you should come in and photograph all the animals. And, you know, being, you know, I always had cats growing up, I'm a huge animal lover. I didn't have to be asked twice. And I thought, well, I think if you don't have something you use your camera for, you use it for nothing. I know people who buy cameras and they don't go out and photograph anything, because unless you pick what you're going to go photograph, I think it's too broad. Yeah. So this is the kitten. In fact, it's the same kitten on I think it's the left-hand side. These 2 kittens got adopted because the person fell in love with the photos I took and posted, and she adopted them together because she couldn't bear to see them separated. And it's that sort of, you know, up until that point they had shelter staff doing photos, and you get the red eyes and the, you know, a bit growly and all this sort of stuff, and that's not going to get anyone adopted. You want a photo that someone sees on the website, they can't wait to get to the shelter to adopt the animal because they think someone else is going to get to it first. Which is one of the reasons we adopted our cat with the white nose, because my partner fell in love with the photo. And that's those 2 today. You know, I still get photos from them. They're now the boss of 2 dogs, apparently. Photogenically, this photo isn't much, but there's the couple behind that are looking at cats, and they're the couple that ended up adopting this cat. And even though they haven't met the cat yet. So that's just why I like that photo. It's like this precursor to what's about to happen. And it's hard to get that sort of colour in a shelter photo, because, you know, they're in enclosures, and he's obviously very sad because he's either chewing at its stitches or something. A lot of before and after shots. I've also been on shelter raids to puppy farms and things like that, done evidence photos for the inspectorate, and you see some pretty hideous things. This girl came in heavily pregnant, couldn't get to her food, so I had to move her food bowl for her. And a couple of weeks later, she had this kitten of the most amazing colours. And then she got really, really sick. And I thought she wasn't going to make it, so I said if she makes it, we'd adopt her. So we did. Ah. That's her, and that's her now. I think she still wishes she had babies sometimes. That's an event called the Million Paws Walk, which I believe is here as well. Is it here? To raise money for the RSPCA. Every goat ran from me except this one who was absolutely fascinated. So these are just some more of the animals. I don't usually talk this long through this section, so we're going to run out of time. So I've got to shoot some amazing animals. If you go to the RSPCA office in Adelaide, every room's got one of my photos as a large print on the wall. That is time-lapse. I did take multiple shots of that. But damn, it was an energetic kitten. That's a dog rescued from a puppy farm. Another, again, from the Million Paws Walk. You can tell that's an old photo because I don't shoot Nikon anymore. If you're ever in Adelaide and you go to the RSPCA head office, that's the front window, which works well. It's like a fishbowl. And at the time, I started a Facebook page called Cuddle Chops. They're getting it mixed up. And if you wonder where the logo is from, it's quite obvious. And I obviously haven't strayed very far. I still get there these days, but just not as much. I used to work in the city, and they used to have a shelter in the city, but I don't work in the city anymore, and the shelter's now in the middle of nowhere, and so it's just really difficult to get to. I did go to Borneo on a RSPCA fundraiser. So this was an orangutan in like an open sanctuary, and it's coming right at me, and he's huge, and I had a guard tugging at my shoulder to move, but glad I got the photo. It's quite sad because of the deforestation, and the dominant male situation. They have to keep a lot of them in sanctuaries and cages and things like that, but I won't go too far into that. When the family was in holiday in Borneo, they were off getting massages and having dinner. I volunteered for BAWA, which is the Bali Animal Welfare Organisation. It deals a lot with the street dogs over there who aren't treated very well by the government. We went out to houses, and they actually desexed a dog on a table in front of a house in the middle of the open, wind and dust, and it's quite crazy, some of the things that goes on. They even go into schools and talk about the rabies problem that's over there, because that's why the government's killing all the dogs. They think everyone's got rabies, blah, blah, blah. So it's been very interesting. But the only real time I ever shot humans back then was things like this. This was we had the Santa Claus bring your dog in, have your photo with Santa. That's the RSPCA board. You can see my cat down the corner that I photoshopped in as well. So that was done in about 5-6 different photos. We had workshops to try and, for about 5 years, I was the only photographer there. And of course, there's a lot of animals coming through that weren't getting good photos, so we started a program to get more photographers through. We had 20 people come in. We said, who wants to photograph dogs? 20 people put up their hands. Who wants to photograph cats? No one. Not one. That's Maddie. She's one of my helpers, and so they get rewarded to pat little puppies. That's a more recent shot from the shelter. And recently we did a photo shoot for the Royal Society for the Blind, so that's a guide dog litter, and it was of course meant to be black dogs on infinite white background, which was just not fun. That's when the backlights failed, and I like the shot better with the slightly grey background. And that's me trying to work with, and there's 3 cats in that photo. But I've never been to a con before, and I had friends in the 90s who went to lots of conventions. They used to come up to, they would go up to Melbourne to see, back in those days it was all the next generation guys, Jonathan Franks and all them going into Australia for all the different cons. And I wasn't even planning to go to Supernova. I was in town, I had my camera with me, which I always do, and there was a couple of anime characters standing across from me at the tram stop, and my partner was away interstate that weekend, and I got nothing else to do, so I jumped on the tram and went to the con. And I did know a couple of things about it. The main reason I went, actually I'll jump to this one first. That's the first photo I ever took at a con. So that's my first cosplay photo. The main reason I went is because Felicia Day was there. Again, Buffy, she was in Buffy, she was in Dr. Horrible, another Joss Whedon thing. I knew she was going to be there, so I thought I'll go along and see what it's all about. And I think what hit me when you first walked through the door is, one thing, the 501st stand's just inside the door, so, you see all these Star Wars characters. And just I always thought, what do you do at a con? It's just, you walk around and look at stalls and buy stuff, it's like, doesn't sound that interesting. But I think the costume quality was much higher than I was expecting, and I think that's probably quite naive to say now, but not being to one before. I think it really jumps out at you a bit. I'd always want to take photos of those sort of characters. It's like, where do you find an elf or where do you find a stormtrooper? And apparently they're readily available if you know where to look. Again, that was the 501st stand. Of course, nearly everyone in these photos from my first con I now know quite well, But everyone says, why did you decide to do cosplay? Obviously, it seems like such a big jump from photographing cats to photographing cosplayers. To me, it seemed quite obvious that it should have been where I started. As the phrase says, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I grew up when the original Star Wars was still coming out. And that probably had the biggest impact on me, because anyone growing up in that era knows that before the original Star Wars, there was like a desert wasteland of science fiction. It was all very post-apocalyptic, really depressing stuff. And so as a kid, when this sort of stuff, the original figures, in high school played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so obviously I sat at the cool kids table. So I grew up in a country town in South Australia, and this is back when pop culture wasn't popular. You were still seen as like the outsider for liking that sci-fi nerdy shit. And so to me, the jump to cosplay was a natural thing, because you can't experiment with lighting with cats, and you can't show them a photo and say, what do you think of this photo? And it does give you the freedom to experiment without having to be subtle like it would with more commercial photography or model photography. You can go quite extreme and get away with it, which apparently I did quite successfully. The next event I went to, which was the local con in Adelaide, which is AvCon in 2013. And one thing I've always done at cons is I've never wanted to photograph someone on the con floor. I've always wanted to take an individual image. So I've always taken people and put them against the stairs or against a window, or just against a background. I didn't want to take just somebody standing on a con floor with noise behind them. It doesn't work as a photo on itself. It's nice for social media and that, but as a photo it doesn't work. And of course I know all these people now. I'm shooting Gemma in a couple of weeks. So a year later, Supernova rolled around again, and this was the first time I went with the sole purpose of shooting cosplayers, and I bought a speedlight by then. Yeah. Basically I had a stand and pointed it at the roof, because I thought all I want is more light, when it took me a lot longer to work out what I want is beautiful light. And then, as someone else told me, what you actually want is beautiful shadows, but that just gets into semantics. And of course, being the graphic designer I am, he's great, he does great. Branded it, put the logo on there like I did, the graphic design. So, did all these portraits of all these characters just against like one of these black fairy backdrop walls. And of course, the first thing everyone asks when you take their photo is, oh, where can I get them? And I'm like, no idea. So the Sunday night after that weekend, I went home and started my Facebook page. And of course, the first thing you got to do is come up with a name. And that's one of the hardest things to do. And I toyed around with different things. I like steampunk. I don't think I've ever dressed up as steampunk, but I just got different terminologies and words. And I wanted to relate it back to that I started as an animal welfare photographer. Steam Cats sounded just too 70s, a bit jive. And it was taken on Facebook, and Steamkittens wasn't. As a result, couple of things. A lot of people thought it meant hot girls. A lot of people thought it was self-referential and thought I was actually female. So I had a lot of people that came up, I thought you would be a girl. I think it came from the name as well. Whereas it's just something, I wanted something short, I wanted something memorable, I wanted something with cats in it. And when you go to the photo walls in Oz Comic Con, it's John Blow photography, something photography, something photography. Then you have Steamkittens, and it seems to stand out to people. And I think when I've shot international cosplayers, they also I really love the name. It seems to connect with people. And I didn't think it'd work as well as it did, but it seems to have stuck. On the way out of the con, I shot this Assassin's Creed girl, and she will come up later. It's funny that she was the last person I shot at the con and the first person to go up in one of my galleries. And again, this was a shot I took that weekend. And again, I started just playing around with basic Photoshop effects and things like that. Can anyone recognize that person? Yeah. It's Major Sam. She calls it a baby photo. Is Major Sam known over here? Yeah. Yeah, that's one of her early cons. That's the first time I met her. As a Belle, she does look very young. So we're back to AvCon, and again, just playing around. That's a Skyrim character. Just grabbed some screenshots of Skyrim and took the grass and put it in. Really basic Photoshop manipulation stuff. Getting the logo on the wall and things like that. The first appearance of my little cat logo down the bottom. Being a graphic designer, branding is important, so I try to keep consistent branding, but it did change a bit at the start. Lydia, there was just this well of light between two buildings, and so it was just amazing. I do want to go back and reprocess it though. Just had the Adelaide Zombie Walk, funny enough, last weekend. In 2014, I went to the Adelaide Zombie Walk, took a ton of photos. Posted a gallery of like 200 photos, all branded, because I like to advertise where they were taken, so the advertise the event where you took them. Next day, cease and desist notice for illegally using the logo of Adelaide Zombie Walk. I've used the PAX logo, I've used the Supernova logo, I've used lots of logos, but no, apparently Adelaide Zombie Walk had an issue. So I had to delete the entire album, all the comments, all the likes, everything, and repost the album again. When I reposted it, I changed the cat to red with the blood drips, which funnily enough became my logo. So at least I can thank them for that. Again, so she was just crawling on some grass with some water behind her, so all the mud's fake, the train of the dress is fake, the forest is fake. I don't usually spend that long on a photo. Most photos I'll spend 10 minutes on. When you've got like 300 photos to shoot, you spend like 5 minutes, you're still only getting through about 20 an hour or 10 an hour. So I barely spend any. People seem to think I spend a lot more time on photos than I do, because I really don't. PAX was my first interstate con. I famously said, I don't think I'd ever travel interstate for a convention. PAX is great. PAX is my favourite event. So this is it's called the Penny Woodhouse, Pollywood House, which is just outside the Melbourne Convention Centre. It's an old boat. It's a friend of mine in a Warhammer costume said, I'm on the beach and can you come and photograph me? So that was the original shot. Never try and get the Melbourne skyline through rigging, because that's a real pain to get rid of. So PAX was pretty good. I met so many people at PAX from around the country, and PAX was huge. PAX has probably the biggest cosplay contingency, even though there's no cosplay as part of PAX. So it's really cool. And then I got this saying from the guy who actually designed that character and wanted to put that photo in a Finnish museum, which was cool. It's always cool to hear that sort of stuff. Again, saying it now, it seems quite silly that this is like 2 years after I started photography, but it's when I first started using ambient and flash together to try and get a mix between the sun and lighting the subject. It's when I first met Hayley Elise. For anyone who knows Hayley, that's not that she wasn't posing there. That was actually her mood, because the cosplay was so uncomfortable. That's Shona. She's famous for playing Lara. I turned to look at my camera to see the photo, and it was quite windy outside, and I heard a crash. And I turned to see my light stand had fallen over and was sliding down an embankment into the river, and there was Lara Croft leaping across to save it, which was quite an image. That's Shona again. That's another one from PAX more recently, done with a nice light. So that's a single light with the light she's holding. She's quite famous for playing Lara, so she was featured in the 20th anniversary book they released. And so that's my photo of her in the bottom corner there, which again is another proud moment to be featured in a tomb of such esteem going down in history. I have bagged her out for picking that particular photo because I think there's better ones. She was actually in the panel I was giving when I actually said that, and then regretted it later. Again, that's after the 2K panel at PAX, so you just get the most amazing cosplayer groups out. And so it was, basically 2 years later before I even attempted a location shoot, because I am not worried about my ability as a photographer. I didn't want anyone going to the effort of getting all dressed up and made up and coming out and shooting and me just producing crap. So there is a building in Adelaide called Z Ward. It's an insane asylum that was shut in 1972 and had been closed ever since. There was a mining company that bought it and was going to turn it into an office block, because that's what you do with insane asylums. And so before they were going to do it, they opened it. The National Trust took it over for a couple of months and opened it to the public. And this building, it's quite infamous because everyone knew it was there, but it's got a ha-ha wall around it, which means the wall on the other side is like twice as deep as the wall this side. So once you jump over the wall, you fall twice as far, and then you can't get out again. So it's meant to keep the inmates in and that sort of thing. And it's the only existing one still in Australia. And so when they opened it to the public, the line went for 2 kilometres to get in there. And obviously the place was always packed with people, and so they decided to have a photography lock-in. So for 2 hours I'd only sell 20 tickets to let people in, so the place wasn't just full of massive crowds. So I bought 3 of the tickets and took 2 cosplayers, and this was my first location shoot. And again, I had no idea what I was doing. I think I could, we went back later and did a better job, but I took Mad Moxie because I wanted characters, and I took the Harley, and this is like the old bathroom that was all destroyed. That's in one of the cells, looking through one of the holes in the door. And so a few months later, apparently the prices in petrol fell and they couldn't afford to renovate it anymore. And so the building is still standing today. They wanted to turn it into a medical museum and things like that. So we went back, and I went back with 20 people. We had like 5 photographers and 12 cosplayers. They charged us $500 an hour. But we all paid $50, and that works out to $1,000. And so that's one of the corridors, and those windows I still love to this day. And so they're all the doors to the cells. This picture here explains why I'm a photographer and not an artist. And this is one of the very rare occasions where I've actually sat down and sketched a couple of images. So there's 2 different compositions in there, believe it or not. This bottom one here, you've got the windows, obviously. And you've got a figure floating above them, then you've got 3 characters underneath it. And because we had 5 photographers and the different models, we were spending half an hour with each pairing. And so I had half an hour to get the shots I wanted. So this is one of the setup shots. And these are just some of the behind-the-scenes shots from it. So that's my background plate. That was my plate with her up on the ladder. That's one shot of Alana on the ground. Alana did all 3 witches. So that was the second plate for that. And the final one. We had the things on the ground just so we knew where the ladder was and so where she was meant to be looking. And that was the final image at that point. Again, I didn't originally envision her being Smoke, but I just couldn't get her feet to look like they weren't standing on a ladder. So I just got rid of them. And then it just happened that Alana was holding the lamp, and so the smoke's coming out of the lamp. So, you can plan some things, and some things just come through necessity. That was the second setup we did. And again, those 2 shots were done in 20 minutes. And I haven't done many more like them, and I don't know why I quite like them. Again, I think if you do original stuff, if you do a shot of Spider-Man, everyone knows what Spider-Man looks like, but if you do stuff like this, you can say it's whatever, and you can make it whatever you want. And I found this photo on my camera when you get home, which is why you never put your camera down to run away to get a lens. Artisan Theory. Artisan Theory is a cosplayer called Mandy. She was the Assassin's Creed character in the last person I took on my first con. when I was first starting out, I wasn't very confident. Mandy came out with me every week and we did photo shoots together for about 2 months. And so this was one of our first shoots we did at the Japanese garden in her Hikari from League of Legends. That was in a studio where I got this old chair, and the car park outside my work was covered in vines, so we just dragged all vines down and covered the chair in it. And you can see, you can still see where the vines end and the fake ones start to fill in the corners and things like that. Final Fantasy, that was at a like an Art Deco theatre in Adelaide. Beautiful windows, these amazing windows. Had to Photoshop my assistant out. And so Mandy was really patient. I got to thank her a lot because she really came out every week and let me practice and build up confidence and things like that. She moved to Brisbane a few years ago and she was back as a guest for AVCon. So this was a shot we did when she was back in town for AVCon. It's probably my favourite shot of her. I worked in the same building for about 10 years, and I set up a studio space because there was all these empty rooms, and of course then my work moved 6 months later. So I had a studio space for 6 months, and it was amazing because you could set up lights and leave them there, and packing up and packing down is the worst. So you could just walk in and play around, and basically one of the most famous for on the cosplay circuit is coloured gels, and this is how I learned to play. You know, I really experimented a lot with gels and lighting and multiple lights and things like that. That's Alana, who was the witch in that other shot. She likes horror themes, and we wanted to do fake blood, so we used the Hammer House of Horror blood recipe, and we made 2 litres of black tar, which you can see around her eye running down from her eye, and we had just enough stuff left to do the coloured drops on her hand and things like that. But yeah, lots of colour gel work, a bit of portrait work, behind the scenes. So again, it was a fun experimental time. Alana again. I photograph Alana a lot apparently. Again, gels and portrait stuff. And I used to do a lot of group things because I used to want to get a lot of people together, but then you don't want people sitting around, so you invite other photographers to come along. And we did a Day of the Dead shoot because I just love the imagery and things like that. So again, lots of playing around with lights and gels and just trying to be creative. Again, there's this old Victorian house in Adelaide that they use. There's this ballroom they use a lot for weddings, but they were having an open day and they let us use the entire building. They charged us, I think we got $750 for the 2 hours, so it was slightly less than Z Ward. But, you know, it's got the amazing staircases. And again, locations are just the hardest thing to find, you know, especially in Adelaide, which is obviously one of the smaller towns in Australia. And there is no way I could stand on a ladder like that anymore. I am from Adelaide. Adelaide is one of the smallest towns. We just lost Oz Comic Con because they left Adelaide and Perth because they weren't financially viable enough, so we're back down to 2 cons. Being mainly a social media entity, getting traction on there used to be hard. Getting traction now is almost impossible. If I was photographing the largest cosplayer in Adelaide, they've got around 10,000 likes. If I was from Sydney or Melbourne, I could photograph cosplayers who had, 500,000 likes. So it's really hard. And obviously if that cosplayer shares that photo, the exposure is so different, which is surprising that I am surprised that my work got quite known as well as it did, considering I'm from where I'm from. I did see it as quite a hindrance. Oz Comic Con did bring international cosplayers to Adelaide, though. One of the first Oz Comic Con that I went to, they brought Abby Darkstar, who's in this photo here, and I shot this with a single light, and now I've got this big light set up, and thinking, it doesn't make that much of a difference the more gear you have if you can achieve this with a small light, This also started a new trend, because this is the same day. I've got my arm in a cast. My entire photography history has been mirrored with my complete downfall of my health. I have got a metal plate in my wrist. So I did this entire shoot, this entire con with an arm in a cast, and it was interesting. A couple of months later, Yaya Han came to Adelaide for AVCon. It's the first time I met her. We did a brief shoot, but she said if I could come to Sydney, we should have a lot more time. So I went to Sydney and we did a shoot during her lunch break during the con. So basically we just left the con, went around the corner to this building, did this shoot, and then went back to the con again. And again, once you do shoot people that are known, you know, obviously if I've got this poster up on my booth, you know, if Jessica comes past and you can see that you've shot Yaya and you see you've shot some of the other international guests, it obviously builds confidence. I had 2 photos in Yaya's 2016 calendar, which was, you know, and that shot was like the centerfold July month, which was really cool. Eve, Stella, who's making it bigger now, they just did a big article on her recently because of how much money she makes as a cosplayer or something. Kamui, Miss Sinister. The other thing I did a lot of, I have no idea how I'm going for time because we started very late and I'm talking a lot. Time check. 10:02? Holy crap. Huh? All right. The other thing I started doing was I started working with a lot of other creative people. I find it very similar to cosplay. I do find it like a symbiotic relationship that, you know, you've got these people who make amazing costumes, but they need a photo of it, so you've got to work together to achieve the result. I got friends who are filmmakers, and they got paid by Crystal Dynamics to make a promo film for the upcoming Tomb Raider. I think it was this add-on to the first re-release. And so we made this film. They're only like 5 minutes. You can find them on YouTube. They're usually just people running around getting shot. But, you know, that got shared all over Crystal Dynamics, social media and things like that, which was pretty cool at the time. Again, I'm finding more and more, you know, I had a video that got 5 million views recently and I got 50 likes out of it. So social media conversion is almost nothing these days. Then we got paid by, you know, the division to do this sort of thing. Because of the graphic designer, I keep doing the posters for all their movies. They did a web series that just won an award in Germany called Goons. The last project we worked on was Far Cry 5 for the release of that game. So that was the poster for that game. That was the key artwork for the game, was this last supper scene, and so they wanted us to try and recreate that. That's what we ended up with. If you look at the original and you look in the top left corner, you can see the grizzly bear, I think his name's Cheeseburger, sitting there. Pure coincidence, we had a koala walk through the set in the exact right spot. Most of this picture came together just through the set decoration. We had to look at the picture quite, you know, and we got bread rolls and pizza and cans and bottles and, you know, goblets and all the guns. We only had one set of guns, again, similar to the last one. This was done in 3 sections, so we just moved all the guns from one side to the other to double the amount of guns we had. The latest project we're working on is the Fallout movie. If we go back to this one, the guy in the red hat in the back there is my assistant Lee, who's sitting over here. I know, as I said, I know a lot of aerialists and acrobats and things like that, so I've worked a lot with people with very limber bodies. This is at a jetty that's about 2 hours out of Adelaide, so we hung her up under a jetty in a net. I was wearing a Sea Shepherd t-shirt at the time, so everyone thought we were doing a protest shoot. Lots more powder shoots, body painters. This is from my hometown in Mount Gambier. The weekend before I was doing my Day of the Dead shoot, I went down to my hometown and this was on the front page, and I'd never met anyone creative in my hometown. And so I contacted her, so we did this Star Wars shoot. There's a lot of old cave systems around Mount Gambier. And because nothing happens in Mount Gambier, it made the ABC website and the local paper. And that's a different body painter I've been working with in Adelaide, where she's been doing some amazing things. I took this was at the Costume Builders Guild ball, a small event. I went up behind stage and there was this set, and this girl had made this costume in a week out of rubbish bags. And I thought it needed a Dalmatian, because, you know, 100 Dalmatians. So I found this image online. Luckily, the artist had tagged it across with, you know, their name. So I messaged them and said, hey, I'd like to use this in this image. This is how I want to use it. And they said, how about I redraw it for you? So she redrew the Dalmatian. Because the lighting and the look, you know, the character's looking up at the character and things like that. Oh, uh-oh. I've done the thing. We've got someone at the desk. Can you hit cancel? Hit no. Yep. And just swipe right. And hit no. Woo! All right. Don't hit the wrong button. So she redrew the Dalmatian, and that's the final image. And I think it just adds something. Again, I've been trying to do more of these sort of things where you augment photos with illustrations. It works well with Disney, I think. I've got some Disney ones. I'm just trying to get this girl to do more illustrations for me. And it's funny when people take your work and make illustrations out of them. So that's one of the Tomb Raider ones. That's Ray Johnson, does a lot of media and news in Australia. This was just a shot I took in my corner at PAX for Rat Queens, and of course the author, it's an independent comic, American comic. Anyone heard of Rat Queens? Woo! It's an indie comic, it's quite popular, and the writer of the comic retweeted it, and apparently it inspired him to do a cosplay cover for the comic. So I've seen some amazing Rat Queen cosplays. So the fact that my little simple image in a corner at PAX inspired him to do a cosplay cover for the comic was just, still don't understand it. Almost there. I was a guest at RTX. First time I met Henchwench, for those who know Henchwench. Did a couple of side shoots, another shoot with Ray, because she liked this setup that I've done a few times. We didn't have anywhere to shoot it, so we just found anywhere we could. The same weekend we shot Hayley. This is in the intro sequence. You saw the wonderful waves we got. I'd been having some eye issues that entire weekend. I found out that I had a retinal detachment a week earlier, and I'm now completely blind in my right eye. Not completely, it's blurry. Not good. So yeah, the issues continued. Didn't slow me down. I've been on tour with Supernova for a while now. The queues have been 2 hours, which is why I use my queuing app now, which we've been using here to most people's appreciation. Another location shoot, went to Queensland, just said, can we come into your air museum and put people on planes? And they said, sure. Apparently it's fine if you ask. So, they had fighter planes, we had them on, so I took Marilyn. They had big old DC-10 1950s airliners that we could go into. That's an old cargo plane. It was like 40. It was 10. It was like a 40-degree day, so it was like 60 degrees in there. So the biggest issue we had with her was sweating and trying to make her look like she wasn't melting. Running out of time. A few pictures. Zoe's now the biggest cosplayer in Adelaide after Jessica Nigri copied one of her designs of Reinhardt. So another person I shoot a lot of. My wonderful my two original assistants helped me for years. My assistants, I rely a lot these days on assistants. I now have a walking issue, which is getting worse, and soon I won't be able to photograph at all. That's the cheery end. So I do rely heavily on people like Lee, who paid for his own ticket over here to help me, so I'm really appreciative of Lee, because I wouldn't have been able to do this without him. If you're getting into Photoshop, levitation shots are the easiest thing to do. Couple of stools. All you need to do is Photoshop them out. It's really, really easy. I'm rushing now, and you can have practical uses for them. This was using the same methodology of just putting... She had a dress that covered most of the stool, so it was pretty cool by the end of it. I didn't have to do much. Matt Mercer and Marisha Ray, first con I was a guest at, I got to share with Matt and Marisha, so we just ran around the pool at night taking photos with lightsabers. I think there's 3 slides left. Okay, the other thing has helped me with my everyday photography. So now when I'm in holiday in places like Canada, I can take pretty photos. So, cosplay photography does help. That was from Moving Train. And that was from the Eurovision final. So... And that's the last photo. So that was taken in Copenhagen. That's till now, my one and only photo shoot overseas. Now I've done lots of them. All right. The end. Thank you. Sorry for the rush at the end. We did start about 10 minutes late, so... Thank you for coming, guys. I really appreciate it.